The Risk Management Guide is a set of risk management standards for community legal centres that deliver legal and related services. It is divided into 10 chapters and includes a number of appendices. For someone who is new to the sector, the glossary of terms at the commencement of the guide is a useful starting point. This presentation will explain the role of the guide. Please ensure you have a copy of the guide with you throughout this slideshow, in either hard copy or PDF format. The guide is a work in progress and changes and updates are made to it from time to time as issues are identified that have not been covered previously or as circumstances change. The guide sets out the CLC Australia National Policy Framework for Risk Management of Legal Practice and Related Service Delivery in Community Legal Centres. It provides information about the National Professional Indemnity Insurance Policy and the National PII Scheme. The guide sets mandatory minimum risk management standards for all community legal centres that are part of the National PII Scheme. It provides additional recommended risk management standards, guidelines and procedures that are good practice. These can be adopted by community legal centres wishing to improve their standards and procedures beyond the level of the required minimum standards. The guide should not be treated as an exhaustive risk management plan. It is designed as one of many complementary risk management policies for a community legal centre. Other risk management resources developed by CLC Australia include the Standards Performance Pathways, Management Support Online, National Financial Management Guide for Community Legal Centres, and the National Management Committee Guide for Community Legal Centres. You can find all of the above resources and much more on the CLC Australia website. If you have not looked at this website, you should familiarise yourself with it once you have finished this presentation. The guide is also linked to the membership criteria of each state or territory CLC association. It is a condition of membership of a state or territory CLC association that the CLC complies with the guide's mandatory standards. A centre must comply with the mandatory standards in order to be accredited through the CLC Australia accreditation process. If a centre is not a member of the State CLC Association, it cannot participate in the PII scheme. There can be serious consequences for a centre that does not comply with the mandatory standards in the guide. Failure to comply will usually be identified as part of the centre's annual cross-check, and this will then be raised by the PII representative with the centre. It is also possible that non-compliance will be identified if a client makes a claim against the CLC. If a failure to comply is identified, the centre will be supported to rectify this. If the issue cannot be resolved, there is a dispute resolution process set out in Chapter 3.6 of the guide. Ultimately, if CLC Australia decides that a CLC has failed to comply with the mandatory standards set out in the guide to a serious degree, the CLC may be excluded from the National PII policy and scheme. The mandatory standards are designed to reduce the incidence of claims under the PII policy. Some of the risks that are covered by the policy and other matters that commonly lead to notifications under the policy are being out of time to commence legal action, conflict of interest, incorrect advice, general complaints and service dissatisfaction, lost or damaged files, failure to advise on an issue, and defamation. The guide does not establish the scope of the retainer between an individual CLC and its clients. It is not an alternative to compliance with relevant legal profession laws in each state and territory. The guide takes account of relevant aspects of these laws and provides a commentary about how CLCs should operate within the existing regulatory framework. However, each lawyer has the responsibility of ensuring they are complying with their professional and ethical duties at all times.
Okay, so my number one tip for using the risk management guide would be to start with the index so that you can clearly see what is covered and in how much detail. Then the next step would be to go to the mandatory standards and see whether there are standards that cover the issue and then what relevant chapters discuss that. So a good example is the practice supervision chapter, and that's covered in the mandatory standards at chapter 2.14. And then there is more commentary at chapters 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8, so you could then go there for further reading.
This completes part 1 of the presentation on risk management and CLC practice. You can now proceed to the next section of the course.